In our model of research methods, we talked about make, say, and do, or actually I should say, do, and make. Say focused on the part about say anyway, focused on what people said, that is their verbal response, surveys and questionnaires and interviews and things like that. Do focused on things like observation research, including contextual inquiry and so forth. And then make is the final one. We can get people to make things with us that helps kind of determine what it is. It helps us to determine what it is they're looking for in a product, how they would use a product, what needs they have, and so forth. We call that participatory design. So the idea behind participatory design is that researchers, designers, users, etc. develop solutions together. And different types of participatory design methods are used to kind of elicit different types of information from people. So for example, here's an example of a project we did sometime back in the medical field. This is a physician and he's creating a collage, believe it or not. So this collage has pictures, a whole bunch of pictures that we had posted on stickers, and each of these stickers were sort of emotionally evocative. They had emotionally evocative information on them. You'll notice they had a couple things here. They have pictures, but they also have words that they ended up using. And what we asked them to do is to use those pictures and those words as kind of a vocabulary, a visual vocabulary, to describe how they feel currently about administering care in their practice and what the ideal situation would be administering care in their office. And what it ended up doing was serving as a great icebreaker to further discussion and interview. So let me see if I can show you an example of these. Some of these aren't great. This is actually a different physician, but we talked about currently. What's the situation? And it turns out it's not as good as you hoped it would be for a physician. These pictures are a little hard to see, but here's a person scratching his head. Here's a really angry dog. Here's a kid that looks a bit worried, cute, but worried. Here's somebody crossing their fingers behind their back. Here's a stop sign indicating all of the bureaucracy that they have to go through. Here's an angry patient who's mad, as he described it later, about not understanding the bills. Here's a broken pencil indicating, just the confusion over billing and things like that. Now over here is a situation where what he really wants is the much more ideal situation where somebody's victorious, they're eating well, there's a happy family, here's a happy baby that he's just delivered, all of those kinds of things. These things here in the middle were things that are kind of current and ideal. So that's a good situation. So if you think about what design is often doing, is it's taking a current situation and making it more ideal. It's migrating the current to the ideal. This gives kind of an interesting way, especially as an icebreaker, to talk about what people feel is the current situation and what a more ideal situation might be. As you can see, this kind of information that you get from image collaging doesn't tell you exactly what to design. In fact, far from it. But instead what it gives you is kind of a way to start thinking about how people feel and what the desires or their dreams are for an ideal situation, and that can be helpful. Other times, we will use participatory design for much more specific kinds of things. So this was the design of something called a 60K loader, a 60K ton loader. So this loads very heavy things onto big trucks and things like that. And it has a cockpit just like you would find in a car or an airplane or something like that. And what we were working on was the redesign of the interior of this device in the cockpit. So what we created here was, this is called a buck. A buck is basically a fake prototype cockpit. And then we had various kinds of things you could place on this thing. We had it covered in felt, and then each one of these items had Velcro on the back. They sometimes call this Velcro modeling. and people could indicate where they want various components in here. So we had a number of people go through this process and basically tell us specifically what things they wanted where in the design of this product. Now, different people wanted different kinds of things, of course, different kinds of orientations, but we began to see some real common types of things that came out simply because people did want certain things in the same place. Second, you will notice if you run enough of these participants that people start to segment into different kinds of configurations. That is, participant 1, 5, 9, and 14 might all want a design of a certain kind, whereas participants 2, 7, and 13 want something somewhat different. But you can begin to see, okay, different types of people want things arranged a different way, and that might give you an idea of different types of models of products or different types of offerings that you could provide. Here's another that's sort of similar to this. This was the design of a radio we were doing for a large radio company. And in this particular case, of course, we're using things like, this is also Velcro modeling. We're using basically pieces of foam core with felt over it, and then a bunch of kind of ambiguous shaped items on here, all with Velcro. And people would kind of design for us what their ideal, in this case, combination phone and push-to-talk device would end up looking like. Now, obviously, their actual device would probably end up looking smaller and slimmer and all of those kinds of things than this, but that's okay. Basically, what it's doing is they're indicating what kind of functions and features they would want in different places, as well as how much screen versus button ought to be, and all of those kinds of things. Now, when they create these things, of course, they go and they describe to us what it is they created, why they chose that solution, what other solutions they considered and why they didn't go with those solutions, etc. And again, you can begin to see, as they're doing this participatory design, what kinds of things are most important to them, what's second most important, and what isn't important at all. And that's really helpful, and in fact, it gives us a lot of information we wouldn't get just from interviewing people alone. We do similar kinds of things with software. In this particular case, this is another general aviation pilot who's drawing out something that might be present on a primary function display or a secondary function display. And you can see here they've color-coded this in a way that over here on the left side you can see their speed, 100 knots down to 90 knots is in black, which is doing just fine. Once you get below, say 90 to 80 or 70 knots, you're concerned about stalling, and you can see that's in yellow, and down here at 60 to 55 knots, you ought to be really concerned about stalling. And that's indicated here. Also, they kind of indicated the altitude in a vertical dimension as opposed to a dial like it's been on other kinds of things and so forth. So this ended up being a really useful design as we created a new multifunction display, MFD it's called. And then other times, you can give people examples of things, and they'll go in and draw what they actually want to see. So in this particular case, this is somebody who actually has some skills at drawing out user interfaces, but in this particular case, they're sketching out the kinds of things they would like to see in a system. So this says something like alarm history I'm seeing, and an alarm drop down, and settings, and so forth. But the participant is helping us kind of sketch this out so that we understand kind of the information structure they would like to see, which can be really helpful in information architecture later on. So that's the idea behind participatory design. The notion here isn't to have people design for you, but instead, in them displaying what they would like, they tend to do a number of things that are really useful. So for example, the things they think are most important tend to be placed front and center. And the things that are less important tend to be hidden a little bit. They make trade-offs between, say, the size of a screen and the size of an entire product along the way. Each time they do things like that, you can ask them questions about, why did you make that decision? Why is it important for the screen to be almost the full size of the device? All of those kinds of things. And that gives you more information as a designer to figure out what kinds of products to create. So I hope you found this helpful. Next up, we will be talking about qualitative data analysis.